those of you in the back, here's some chairs here, and she's getting extra chairs. So here are 2 chairs right here that I see handy. And she'll bring some more. Welcome everyone, while we're getting more chairs. Welcome, tell us who you are and where you're from. Did you all hear her? Say a little louder. Pittsburgh.
Rex Davis from Pittsburgh.
I'm Shirley Jackson, and this is my home.
Next.
John Boyd from Dallas, but back and we Pittsburgh, Texas.
And my mother and his mother were same Chelsea.
Daryl, House Theory. Dallas, Texas.
Anthony, Greg Gallup.
Great Michael right here.
Shirley Robertson, born in Hillsborough, raised in Mineola.
Uris Robinson, Hawkins.
Phyllis Cornell, Pittsburgh.
Female Hill, Pittsburgh.
I'm from Pittsburgh, Texas.
Another cousin. I have 2 cousins right here we missed.
Gilmer, Dora, oh, Brittany Jeffrey, Gilmer, Texas.
Carolyn Marshall, Gilmer, Texas.
They always rock and loud.
Cousin.
Yeah, see what? Rock around.
Yeah, cousin. Jory, introduce you. Welcome. And so how many chairs for we need? And that's my husband. This chair, my chair is available. Here are 2 chairs in front also.
I used to play ball when y'all were young.
Okay, so there are 4. So I'm just going to raise it to make sure everybody has a seat.
Okay.
So welcome.
I think it's available.
So welcome to They Won't Let Me Rest, the importance of preserving your family history. I'm Dr. Gail Thompson. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come here. Some people drove long distances, but even if you just drove from around the corner, I'm very grateful that you're all here. There are other places that you can be. I want to give Lynn Jewett a special shout out for having me here. Gwen invited me here, and I'm honored to be here. My cousin, Brenda Jeffrey, stand up, cousin Brenda. We just met last summer.
We did, and what a treat, I'm telling you.
I'm actually here, cousin Perry, our genealogy team that I'll say more about, and my husband, we were here. And it turns out another cousin said, Gail, you and Brenda are cousins.
Yes,
and
right.
the rest has been history. We've
That's
been in
right.
touch ever since.
We've been in
She
touch ever
is
since.
a former Gilmer city councilwoman. She's a hospice nurse, and she is on the board here at this museum. So her sister, cousin Dora, is sitting next to her.
That's right.
But I also want to thank all of you for being here. Many of you who are seated here today or standing have contributed to my family history journey. Some of you have shared stories, photos, audio tapes, letters, or other information, obituaries. I'm going to come back to obituaries later on. Obituaries with me. Several of you have encouraged others to attend this presentation, And many of you, as I said before, have driven long distances to be here. Unfortunately, as a result of the time that it's going to take me to get through the presentation and then for us to have Q&A time, I can't thank every single person by name, but please know that I am grateful to every single one of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your contributions and for your support. So here's a brief bio. I am a descendant of numerous Upshur County and Camp County former residents. I am a retired professor. As the CEO of Inspirations by Gail, I provide workshops, lectures, and keynote addresses for schools, churches, community organizations, family wellness groups, and I'm passionate about empowering African American women and girls. I am also a genealogist who works on family history research every single day that I can, at least 5 days a week, if not more. I am the author of the following books, and I'm not going to go through the book titles, but most of my books are available on Amazon.com, or you can ask your local bookstore to order if you're interested. In spite of what I just said, my most important accomplishments are being a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. This amazing man standing right there, Mr. Rufus Thompson, can you just kind of move up a little closer so people can We have been married, August 2nd will be 38 years. And I don't tell very many people this, but we were only dated for 3 months, okay? Our marriage, thank God, has lasted for 38 years. He is a former middle school teacher. He has taught university courses. He's an author. He has his own plane, so during his spare time, he flies. I call his plane his other wife, okay? But that is his hobby. He is passionate about flying, and he has recently started a new business. Came out of retirement, started a new business called thepocketadvocate.com. He has developed some amazing tools to help educators and parents communicate more effectively with each other, and supervisors and employees. So check that out, thepocketadvocate.com, please. Our daughter, Dr. Nafisa Thompson Spires, is a professor at Cornell University, and she is a best-selling author. In fact, today Friday, today's Saturday. Yesterday, and I don't know if it aired yesterday, it was going to air later, but they recorded one of the stories from her best-selling book for PBS, American Experiences. But anyway, that's her daughter, Dr. Nafisa Thompson Spires. In the middle is our middle child, Nashay Thompson, who is an educator and an entrepreneur. She owns Nashay Cosmetics. Check her out online, NashayCosmetics.com. Our baby, Stephen Thompson, is a mechanical engineer, and he is a musician. He lives in Minnesota, and our pride and joys are our grandsons, Ivan and Isaiah, ages 10 and 13. So I want to share a story that made an unforgettable impact on me with you, and it may seem like a long story, but you'll see why I'm telling this story. I'm going to start by telling that story and then share the main points that I hope that you will take away from this presentation. And then I'm going to explain 5 reasons why it's important for you to preserve your family history. I'll explain some ways that you can get answers about your family history, and the handout that you have has a lot of the ways on there that I'll elaborate on, but there are also some there that I won't have time to go into detail about, because I want us to have enough time for questions and comments. I will make some concluding remarks, and then I will share a final story. I'm going to start with the story and end with the story, and then we'll get into the... Jethro Harris Jr. was born in Rocky Mount, Texas, in Camp County. And his grandfather, Gilbert Harris, owned a lot of land in Rocky Mount. Do we have anybody who's related to any Harrises here? The Harrises are very hard to find, and you'll find out later on why. My mother, Velma Boyd, also known as Bay, was born in Pittsburgh, Texas, in Camp County. And her grandfather, Richard Boyd, owned a lot of the land in Pittsburgh. However, Before Camp County was formed in 1878, ma'am, there are three chairs up here if you'd like to sit down. Before Camp County was born in 1874, many of my ancestors lived in Upshur County. Here are three examples. In 1870, Peter Bell, my third great-grandfather, and his wife, Betty Faulkner, who was my third great-grandmother, lived here in Upshur County. Actually, they lived very close to Gilmer. My fourth great-grandmother, Julia Bell, who was Peter's mother, also lived with Peter and Betty. Julia was born in South Carolina in 1800. Peter and Betty were the grandparents of Peter Sublett, my mother's grandfather. Sublets, Bells, Faulkners, or Walkers, Greens, anybody related, Porters, to Peter Sublett and the Bells, raise your hand. Thank you all for being here. In 1956, my parents moved to San Diego, California, where my father was stationed in the Navy. They had 4 children together. So here you see my mother holding my late sister Tammy. My sister Tracy is standing in front of my parents, and my father is holding me. So here are my mother's 4 Harris children, Tracy, my late brother Jeffrey, who was my father's only son, my late sister Tammy, and me on the end. After my parents divorced, my father moved to Northern California. Although each of my parents had 2 additional children, I always missed not having extended family members living nearby. I'm trying not to get emotional because yesterday I got to hang out with 9 cousins and the day before several cousins. So for the person that grew up being the little girl who felt shortchanged, it's overwhelming to me, and I got a lot of cousins here today. So even though we often visited Texas during summers, I grew up feeling shortchanged by not having cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and other close relatives living in San Diego. During one of our trips to Texas, my maternal grandmother, Frances Sublett Johnson, told me a story about her maternal great-grandfather, Dandy Bear. Do we have any Johnsons or people related to Johnsons here today? No. The story that Grandmother Frances told me about Dandy Bear is one of the main reasons why I am passionate about researching and preserving my family history. According to Grandmother Frances, Dandy Bear was a mixture of African American and American Indian. He was born in Georgia. His slave name was Daniel Abram. And you see Abram is spelled several different ways because in census and other records, it's spelled numerous ways. There's an Abram back there. Phyllis, raise your hand. She has an Abram in her family tree, and we're trying to connect her Abram to mine. That's right. At some point, an enslaver took Dandy Bear from Georgia to Mississippi. In Mississippi, Dandy Bear fathered 18 children by his wife. Well, now see, I heard somebody say, let me just digress here to say something that I had in my presentation that I took out, but you all have given me permission to add it. And that is this. It was very common for enslavers to use African American men as breeders, especially after 1808, when the transatlantic slave trade was outlawed and the domestic slave trade, whereby slaves were taken from Virginia, North Carolina, and every place you can think of to the south. Okay, but they started putting black men in pens actually, and making them breed as if they were animals. So when you hear that a man had 40 kids, 24 kids, or whatever, often it's because that was instilled in people during the slavery era. So according to Grandmother Frances, after he fathered those 18 children, he was then sold from his family to someone in Texas. And I'm trying to find that someone, the identity of that individual. Cousin Saint, and I don't know where Cousin Saint is. She was supposed to be here. Do you know, baby brother?
Cousin Saint, for as I know, she's in hell, we waiting.
Oh, and I asked her last night if she had transportation. No, Cousin Saint will be 91 years old. She is truly, and she wanted to be here and promoted it. And I'm so sorry to hear that because I'm going to be talking about her a lot, what she has shared. So Cousin Saint and Cousin Verdell, who could not be here because of a medical situation, they told me that Dandy Bear and his family lived in Ore City and Coffeyville here in Upshur. In Texas, Dandy Bear fathered 18 children. 18 more, so that's a total of 36 children that we know of. In Texas, Dandy Bear fathered 18 children by his wife, Polly Williams, who was also born in Georgia. Francis, their first child, was born in 1861. In 1866, their third child, William, was born, and in 1890, Emma, their last child, was born. William Abram was my maternal second great-grandfather. William's daughter raised my mother and also raised baby brother. I'm sorry, his name is John Boyd, but I grew up calling him baby brother. But my mother and his mother were raised in the same household, and he and my mother were raised by the same person, my great-grandmother and his grandmother. No one really knows the person who I'm talking about who raised my mother Williams' daughter. No one knows her real first name because throughout her lifetime she changed it several times, and some census takers misspelled it. For example, in 1900, a census taker reported her name as Govey A. Brand with an N on it instead of Abram. In 1910, a census taker recorded her name as Gorse Abram, a U, Abram spelled with a U. Other names for her that appear in various records are Grovey, Lovey, and Dovey. However, in Pittsburgh, Texas, she was known as Miss Put, Mama Put, Cousin Put, Grandmother Put, or Big Mama. And everybody knew my great-grandmother Put. Somebody told me yesterday, you remind me of Miss Put. In fact, all the grandmother Put's descendants, raise your hand, Lakita, 3, and me. Okay. But back to the story. As I listened to my grandmother Frances' story about Dandy Bear, I was troubled by many aspects of that story. First of all, of course, I was upset that Dandy Bear and his parents and those 18 children in Mississippi and some of the children born in Texas were enslaved. I was sad that he had to leave his 18 Mississippi-born children behind when an enslaver took Dandy Bear to Texas, and I think I'm close to finding what happened to some of those kids. That's a big thing to me, is finding my Mississippi relatives who were Dandy Bear's children, those great-grands that came from that line. However, the most troubling part of the story to me was the tragic way that his life ended. According to Grandmother Frances, when Dandy Bear was an old man, he hanged himself from a tree. For those of you who are saying she got a PhD and she's saying he hanged himself from a tree, hanged is what you say when you're referring to a human being whose life ended on a tree or by lynching. Hung is, I hung a picture on the wall, so hung is for objects, so just in case. Anyway, during one of my Texas visits, my grandmother even showed me the tree from which, on which he killed himself. Over time, I forgot where that tree was located, but I never forgot about Dandy Bear. As I grew older, I wanted to know more about him. I had many questions. I've already told you that I wanted to know what happened to those 18 children who were born in Mississippi. My third great-grandfather, Dandy Bear, may have killed himself in old age, but how many of us could have survived being enslaved in 3 different states, Georgia, Mississippi, and Texas, having to leave your children behind, and then when freedom finally came, having to endure racism and many other injustices. After all the hell that he went through on this earth, I admire Dandy Bear for surviving for as long as he did. This is one reason why I'm not ashamed to tell this story and will continue to tell it. Dandy Bear's story has made a lasting impact on me. To be honest, I strongly believe that Dandy Bear's spirit won't let me rest until I get answers and find ways to preserve his story. But it's not just Dandy Bear. Many of my other ancestors won't let me rest until I uncover and preserve their stories, and I can start calling their names out right now, but I won't. But I'm very tempted to see who's from those lines, but I'm gonna keep it moving. In the decades that I have been trying to get answers about Dandy Bear and other ancestors who won't let me rest, I've made a lot of progress. I've even gotten answers to some of my questions about Dandy Bear. Here are a few examples. My cousins, Ruthie Lee Beasley, AKA Saint, who will be 91 years old and can't be here today. Saint, Barbara Hawkins, please keep Barbara in your prayers. She just had a tragedy in her family. My cousin Della Mae Abram was coming from Sulphur Springs, just got out the hospital last night. Please keep her in your prayers, Barbara, as well. My cousin Bobby Farmer, who lives in Los Angeles, Jody Hashaway, and Verdell Gilbert have shared additional information with me about Dandy Bear. Cousin Saint was married to one of Dandy Bear's great-grandsons, and Cousin Saint is also my cousin on her maternal side. Not only did cousins Della Mae Abram and Barbara Hawkins tell me what they know about Dandy Bear, but they shared photos with me of two of his children, his Texas-born children. Walter Abram and Maddie Abram Johnson were children of Dandy Bear and Polly Williams. Walter was the grandfather of Della Mae Abram, and she knew him personally. She told me a lot of fascinating stories. Maddie was the great-grandmother of Barbara Hawkins. Barbara lived with her during part of her childhood and heard lots of family stories. Both Barbara and Della Mae were told Dandy Bear's story. Preserving the family history through oral tradition is one of the easiest ways, of course, to pass on that history and make sure it never dies. I've also learned that Dandy Bear was born around 1832. His parents were born in Georgia instead of in Africa, as I had assumed. In 1870, Dandy Bear lived near Gilmer. He is listed on the Texas county rolls during the years ranging from 1880 to 1891. Polly Williams, Dandy Bear's wife, died between 1890 and 1900. Dandy Bear's son, Jesse, named one of his sons after Dandy Bear. My second great-grandfather, William, had a grandson who was named after Dandy Bear. I have found the death certificates of most of Dandy Bear's Texas-born children. Death certificates have so much great family history. Burial places, who the parents were, where the parents were born, if the informant knew that. I'll say more about that later on. Several of Dandy Bear's descendants have taken DNA tests. I'm gonna say a lot more about DNA tests later on, and they show up as my cousins. So that's gonna help me get the Mississippi and Georgia answers. Dandy Bear committed suicide sometime after the 1910 United States federal census was taken. At the time, he lived in Lafayette, which is right on the border of Upshur and Camp counties. When Cousin Saint, who could not be here today, was 6 years old, when she was 6 years old, her mother told her about Dandy Bear and took her to the place, and at that time, she said it was nothing but a shack where he lived. And the tree that he killed himself on was near that shack in Lafayette. But her mother told her Dandy Bear's story, and thank God her mother showed her where he lived and died, because I have been wanting to know ever since my grandmother told me the story where he died, because I forgot where the tree was that she took me to, but thank God Cousin Saint knew. So I formed a small genealogy research team. My husband supported us and helped us and drove around and took us here, there, and everywhere, including here to this museum last year. Last year was just August and September. And Cousin Perry Duffy, Cousin Drika Johnson, Cousin Malika Crawford were all a part of that research team, and we went all over the place, courthouses, cemeteries, here to this museum. Genealogy rooms. I'll say more about that later on, because they have ancestors that won't let them rest either until they get some answers. For Perry, it's the Houghton line. So we did deep research over a series of several days, and here I am standing on Cousin Saint's porch, and she ended up taking us to the place where Dandy Bear ended his life. And so here we are. My husband was taking the picture, and Cousin Saint was not in the picture, but we were all right there near the site where the tree once stood and where the shack that he last lived in was. So this was September 2023. And then a few days later, my husband, Cousin Perry, and I went back to the site of his death to place flowers there. Where Dandy Bear lived and died is very close to Lafayette Cemetery. So I want to read a historical marker that is at the Lafayette Cemetery and tie it to Dandy Bear. Based on oral family history, Lafayette Cemetery is the final resting place of former African American slaves. Many of these men, women, and children were left in their final resting place without permanent headstones. One of these men was Ben Johnson. On his behalf and unnamed others, his descendants dedicate this memorial and honor their living legacy. Ben Johnson was Dandy Bear's son-in-law, married to his daughter, Maddie Abram, that I showed you a few minutes ago a picture of. Based on all the research that I've done, I strongly believe that Dandy Bear and his wife, Polly, are buried in unmarked graves in Lafayette Cemetery. So here are the main points that I would like for you to take away from the rest of the presentation and what I've already shared. Every single person is important and has a story that is worth telling and can benefit others. Each family is important. Every child needs to know his or her family history. Even if your ancestors aren't pressuring you to uncover and preserve their stories, one of the best ways that you can empower younger African American relatives is to help them learn their family history and encourage them to share it with future generations. So here are 5 reasons why it's so important for us to preserve our family histories. Number 1, even though this is Black History Month, throughout the U.S., there are strong efforts by some politicians and others to eliminate Black history from the curriculum of colleges and universities. Therefore, at this crucial time when some folks are determined to keep Black history from being taught, we must become proactive about preserving the stories and contributions of our unsung ancestors. Although we may not be able to prevent this anti-Black history backlash from occurring, we can do our part to preserve Black history by making sure that our younger family members know their personal family history and encourage them to share it with future generations. Number 2, in many K-12 schools, the only things that African American students learn about Black history is your ancestors were slaves. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus. Martin Luther King Jr. led the civil rights movement. As a result of this, most African American students leave high school with a very limited knowledge of Black history, including their personal family history. A third reason why it's important for us to preserve our family history is the U.S. economy was built on the backs of our unpaid ancestors. Therefore, real Black history should include the life stories and contributions of our unsung ancestors. Without the unpaid labor of our African American enslaved ancestors like Dandy Bear, who worked in 3 different states without wages, America would never have become as prosperous as it is today. Many corporations and families in the U.S. gained or inherited their wealth. When people try to make you feel like your ancestors were lazy, and well, let me just keep going. Many corporations and families in the U.S. gained or inherited their wealth from the labor of our unpaid ancestors who worked on tobacco, cotton, sugar, indigo, and rice plantations and elsewhere. Here's just one related example from a very powerful report that you can download for free called the Transatlantic Slave Trade Report. Quote, kidnapped Africans trafficked into New Orleans were enslaved on nearby sugar and cotton plantations. Some were enslaved by the city government, which relied heavily on enslaved Black labor to build the infrastructures that New Orleans needed to thrive as a commercial port. And once the domestic, remember after the transatlantic slave trade, whereby it was illegal to bring slaves from Africa to the U.S., when that was so-called, but they were still smuggling ships from Africa. I can tell you that right now. Do some research on Africaville near Mobile, Alabama. They were bringing slaves in here into the U.S. illegally well after the transatlantic slave trade was outlawed around 1808. But the domestic slave trade, whereby slaves could be brought from other states in the U.S. all over the place and were bred to have more and more children, that kind of thing, thrived here. And at one point, New Orleans became the second largest slave port in the U.S. after Charleston. There are 3 seats up here. There's a seat there. There's one there. There's one there. You all come on in and welcome. Enslaved Black people in New Orleans dug drainage canals along the river, laid down, I'll wait until, there's a seat right there, there's one there, and there's one here too. So if you all want to sit, you're welcome. So enslaved Black people dug drainage canals along the river, laid down streets, cleared forests, and constructed levees to protect the city. Black people enslaved by the city were forced to clear roads, collect garbage, and maintain city services. In the late 1700s, enslaved Black people twice rebuilt the city of New Orleans after it was destroyed by fire. Never learned that in the history books, huh? I have a PhD. I never ever heard any of this until I read that Transatlantic Slave Report, which not only focuses on what happened in Louisiana, but in many of the states that became wealthy as a result of the unpaid labor of our ancestors. Please download that report, and if you don't do anything else, skim it, but you will want to read it. It's powerful. So here's a 4th reason why it's so important for us to preserve our family history. Many of our ancestors were extremely wise and intelligent. That's why they're calling me from the grave. Their spirits are saying, Gail, Gail. Get the answers and tell others. Knowing the healthy strategies that they use to navigate life can help our youth develop a roadmap for success in life. This roadmap for success in life can include effective ways to develop a strong spiritual life, understand and manage emotions effectively. You know, that is one of the most powerful things besides helping them know how to develop a strong spiritual life. If we can teach our youth how to manage their emotions wisely, guess what? It'll keep a lot of folk out of jail, out of the principal's office. Because anger is a normal emotion. It's all right to be angry, but you got to know how to manage it effectively to keep yourself from getting in trouble when you want to fire on somebody. Helping them learn how to manage anger, pain, all kinds of things can really empower our youth. Our ancestors had to be mad every single day.
That's right.
But a whole bunch of them never ended up in jail.
Yeah.
They knew something that we can benefit from knowing.
That's right.
That roadmap for success needs to definitely include some stress reduction strategies. Stress is a normal part of life, but how we manage it is so very important. Dealing with bullying. Bullying is rampant. My grandsons, I had my whole church praying for my grandsons who were dealing with bullying at the beginning of this school year. But God has helped me learn some ways to manage my emotions effectively, so I didn't have to go down to the schoolhouse and beat up some little kids who was messing with my grandkids, you see? I had to pray my way through it, okay? But anyway, that wasn't a part of the presentation. Also, that roadmap to success needs to include strategies to help our youth know how to excel academically in K through 12 schools, at the university level, wherever they are, whatever learning environments they are in. Develop strong financial literacy skills, ways to manage money wisely, and create generational wealth. Cousin Bill Sublett, I was hoping Bill was going to be here, and I had a phone conversation about this the other day, and he was telling me some of the stories his father told him when he was growing up about financial literacy, which wasn't even a common term back in the day. But his father knew something that helped Bill. Also, Cousin Saint's grandfather, Phil Beasley, escaped from Georgia with his 20-plus kids and his wife and trekked to Texas. Why was this man who wasn't able to go to school able to buy over 100 acres of land in Camp County? Because he knew something about financial literacy that I sure wish he could tell me about. They knew things, but they didn't have the opportunities that we had. That roadmap to success should also include teaching our youth ways to deal with the daily microaggressions. I learned, and here's a simple strategy I learned about microaggressions. When I go to a grocery store and the checker can speak to everybody, cashier can speak to everybody who came before me, and when I come, she don't even look up and can't say hello or how's your day, but I heard you say it to the person in front. So I do, you know what Tyler Perry does in his Medill role? I do a hello. You're gonna see me, you're gonna speak to me before I give you $1 on my money, or I'm gonna wait here until you do. So I'm training that person that when you see me, just like when you saw the person in front of me, you spoke to her, I'm teaching you some customer service that applies to me. And then, if I come back a second time, this was not part of the presentation, but I'm gonna tell you anyway. If I come back a second time and you're not speaking, I'm gonna tell your manager, and then I'm calling Sprouts. It's usually Sprouts. One of these healthy food places that overcharges you for buying healthy food. But if you don't open your mouth and I'm spending all this money up here, after I told your manager, I'm gonna call the headquarters and let them know, or send them a letter or something. You need some customer training, okay, when it comes to me. But anyway, that was a side note. Teach our youth, because you see, if I get loud or ugly acting up in there, you see, I'm gonna be carted off to jail. But if I say, hello, you're gonna speak to me, sister, and you can't call the po-po on me for just saying hello, okay? So teaching just basic things that kids have to deal with every day, because we as adults still have to deal with it all, can help our youth develop that roadmap for success. They gotta know how to deal with racism, because it's alive and well. It has not ended just because our ancestors are no longer enslaved.
That's right.
They have to know how to deal with racial profiling. They have to know how to deal with driving while black. They have to know how to deal with law enforcement in a way that's not going to cause them to take a bullet because somebody was afraid that they were reaching for a gun. In the book, A Brighter Day, how parents can help African American youth. I have a whole section on that. Having your kid, telling your child, put your hands on the steering wheel. Do not pull out, try to get your ID. Don't you make any kind of move until you've gotten permission if you want to live. That was not a part of the presentation, but that roadmap for success can make the ultimate difference in a child's life. And our ancestors knew some healthy ways to deal with this stuff. They didn't have the opportunities that we have. Many were not permitted to attend school, as I said, regarding Phil Beasley, because it was illegal for them to even learn how to read. Nevertheless, many of them found effective ways to survive, to thrive, and handle ongoing problems and challenges in healthy ways. Some of the challenges that I haven't already mentioned: medical apartheid, being underserved and mistreated by doctors and nurses who think you're faking. You're a hypochondriac because you're black and lazy and don't want to work. Read the book Medical Apartheid. Read about the Tuskegee syphilis study where they used black men as guinea pigs and let them die. And tell me medical apartheid still occurs. I could tell you some stories that I won't. Wage discrimination, being underpaid or not paid at all, and wage discrimination still exists. Property theft, being swindled out of land that was rightfully yours. Having to sit in the back of buses and trains and having to give up your seat for white people. Having to go through back doors in stores and not being served in restaurants. Those are just some of the things that they dealt with. Learning how our ancestors handled these and other problems and sharing them with our youth are ways to help our youth develop a successful roadmap in life. So the fifth and final point that I will touch on in terms of why it's important to preserve our family history is our youth can even learn some important lessons from examining the lives of the so-called bad apples in the family. By bad apples, I'm referring to family members who resorted to unhealthy practices in order to deal with their pain and their anger. Remember the managing the emotions piece that I talked about, why it's so important for us to learn healthy ways? Some of our ancestors resorted to unhealthy coping strategies stemming from abuse, racism, and other sources of trauma. Some of them were misunderstood because they never explained why they behaved the way that they did. Many of our parents, grandparents, and other ancestors grew up in homes where children were not allowed to ask questions about the past. One of the main reasons is that reliving and speaking about the past may have been too painful for those who experienced ongoing trauma. Here's another example. My father died when I was 13 years old. His father, Jethro Harris Sr., died 1 year after my father died, and my father's mother, Murdis Allen Harris Cummings, died 1 year after my grandfather. So my father, his father, and mother, and my father was that couple's only child. They all died 3 years in a row. This made it very difficult for me to learn about and meet my father's people. Welcome. You all want to come over here where you can see? There's room. Okay. However, in 2022, thanks to former Navy Commander Thomas Hill, and if you please pray for Thomas Hill, he's in a hospital right now, and others, I was blessed to meet my second cousin, Lorraine Denise Linwood, and this picture was taken in 2023 at the Rocky Mound Community Family Reunion, and my cousin Nathaniel Aldrich spearheads that huge gathering of people who were either born in Rocky Mound or their parents, grandparents, or other ancestors were. Wonderful reunion. But anyway, the picture was taken in 2023, but Denise and I actually met a year before that. Since then, Denise has played a very important role in helping me find, connect with, and learn about my father's people. She's answered many of my questions and shared family stories with me by telephone nearly every week on her off day. Many of the stories that she has shared were about our great-grandmother, Rebecca Taylor Allen Nixon, AKA Mama Becky. Like my father, Mama Becky was born in Rocky Mount in Camp County, and during their childhoods, Denise and my dad often lived with Mama Becky. After moving from Rocky Mount to Pittsburgh, Mama Becky became a midwife in order to deliver the babies of women who couldn't afford to give birth in a hospital. The stories that Denise has shared with me about my grandmother Murtis, who was Mama Becky's daughter and my father's mother, and other relatives have been a blessing to me. However, the photos that she and cousin James Earl Allen have shared with me of Mama Becky are priceless because I never got to meet my great-grandmother. So I think I probably did when I was little and spent the night at my great-grandmother's house. My grandmother's house, but I don't remember Mama Becky. So here's Mama Becky as a young woman, and here she is as the midwife. Denise told me that when she was very young, one day she asked Mama Becky to tell her about slavery days. Although Mama Becky was usually willing to answer her questions, this time was different. Those were hard times, she said. Don't ask me about them again. Mama Becky was born nearly 30 years after slavery was outlawed in the United States. However, as the grandchild of former slaves, even when she became a grandmother herself, the topic of slavery was too painful for her to discuss. There's a seat here in case you want. If slavery was too painful for the grandchild of slaves to discuss, imagine how difficult it was for our unsung ancestors who were enslaved and their children to discuss. Mama Becky's refusal to talk about slavery and warning Denise not to ever ask her about it again speak volumes about the lasting effects of slavery on our ancestors and their descendants. The term post-traumatic slave syndrome has been used to describe many of these effects that have been passed down from generation to generation. Because of slavery, racism, the medical apartheid I talked about earlier, and other problems, our ancestors lived with ongoing trauma. But they didn't have access to parenting classes. They didn't have access to therapy or counseling. Many did the best that they could to navigate this life and to rear their children as they thought best. As I said, many learned healthy ways to manage their pain and anger over the injustices that they experienced, such as some relied on their faith in God, prayed and hoped for a better day. Many sang songs of deliverance. I was practicing one this morning I was going to sing for you all, but I'm not. Many sang songs of deliverance to calm their nerves and soothe their pain. By the way, scientists have found that music can have calming and therapeutic effects even on people with dementia. Others, however, were so damaged and traumatized by their experiences of being verbally, physically, emotionally, sexually abused that they held their pain inside, never talked about it, and took their secrets to the grave with them. Others resorted to unhealthy coping strategies such as adopting various types of addictions to cope with their pain. And some became perpetrators of abuse. As a result, horrible things went on within families and negative generational cycles were passed to other family members. In other words, although some who became perpetrators took their secrets to their graves, the damage from their actions was left behind for others to find ways to cope with. Because of this, some of us are still healing. Some of us are still healing from those negative generational cycles that have been passed down to us by family members who may not have even understood the damage that they were doing. I believe that knowing the truth about why various family members behave the way that they did is an important part of the healing process for us and our youth. We can learn valuable lessons from examining the lives, especially the childhoods of these so-called bad apples in our families, and share the lessons. You don't have to share all the ugly stuff that went on, but the lessons that we can learn from the lives of those who did not manage or handle their pain and anger in healthy ways. What are the lessons? Passing them on to our youth is important. We also have the options today that they didn't have, our ancestors, of seeking therapy with trained professionals. Reading self-help books. I've been reading self-help books all my adult life. I'm reading 2 wonderful ones now on emotional eating because that's my coping strategy. And I found out it was anger, stuffing food on top of anger, because you know I don't want to go to the fisticuffs type thing. So, but stuffing the food is not healthy. I'm finding some healthy ways to deal with my anger besides eating, binge eating, emotional eating. These books are really wonderful. But anyway, I've been reading self-help books all my life, listening to related podcasts or watching related online videos regarding how to heal from trauma. These are options that we have and we can share. Hey, here's some options for you with our youth. This is a reminder that we can break negative generational cycles and share strategies with our youth to help them develop that roadmap for success in life that I mentioned. We have options, they have options, and choosing the right options can improve the quality of their lives. So I talked about 5 reasons why it's important to preserve your family history. Now here's some ways to get answers about your family history. Most of them are listed on the handout. That if you didn't get one, let us know. I made like 70 handouts, so hopefully there's some extras around. But here are some ways to get answers about your family history. Start at home. See what you already have there or have access to. A lot of our relatives, older relatives, wrote the family genealogy in an old Bible. See if there are old Bibles, photos of family members, and you see old photos and you don't know who this is, start asking around, who is this black and white picture of? Letters. One of our, in fact, where's Aunt Pearlitha's son sitting? Did he leave? Bobby Ray Porter, there you are. His mom wrote the family history, and one of our cousins, Charles Hill, sent it to me where his mom wrote the family history, the Sublette family history, in a way that gave me a lot of wonderful information. You may find old letters that explains who was the grandfather or something that is just one piece of the puzzle that will help you move forward, move closer to getting more answers. Birth certificates, of course, death certificates, family reunion programs, obituaries. I'm going to come back to obituaries when I talk about preserving your family history. Talking to family members, asking them if they have letters, audio tapes, or other items about your family history, and ask them what they remember about ancestors that you might have been too young to remember. Cemeteries. Visit cemeteries where your ancestors may be buried. Our genealogy team that I told you about, Cousin Perry, my husband, Cousin Saint, Cousin Denise Drika, and not Denise, Cousin Drika and Cousin Malika. We visited a lot of cemeteries last year, but the year before I visited the Rocky Mountain Cemetery in Union Chapel where I found lots of my ancestors' graves. In 2023, our research team visited the Lafayette Cemetery, Bolton, Traylor, Coffeyville, Ore City, Center Point, and then my husband and Perry and I we went to Wilkes after the other members of the team lived in the Dallas area. So here's a picture of Cousin Drika and me at the Coffeyville Cemetery here in Upshur, and then Cousin Perry and me at the Center Point Cemetery. Findagrave.com is a great free online resource where you can put in the name of your ancestor and the city and state where you think that person died and is possibly buried, and you will, a lot of times all the cemeteries in that area will come up, but You might be able to even get a death certificate that way. I use findagrave.com all the time in searching for the burial places of ancestors and more recent relatives. Texas Gen Web is wonderful. It's a great online source where you can find not only where you're at, and what I like is you click on the county. If you're researching Upshur County, Dallas County, Titus, whatever county, you click on the county, it'll show you all the records that they have. And often the black cemeteries, the African American cemeteries are grouped separately, so you can cut to the chase if you're looking for burial information and death certificates. You can also get census records, state census records from Texas Gen Web, and county history information. Very wonderful resource. US Gen Web is the umbrella website where you see a map of the entire US. You click on the state that you think your ancestor lived in, be it Georgia, wherever, and you can see all the records that you can access for free for that state. Courthouses are great places to find death records, birth records, land records, marriage records, delayed birth records. I had never heard of delayed birth records until our genealogy team and I were at the Camp County Courthouse a few months ago, and the delayed birth records books pertain to people whose births were not recorded when they were born, but after. So sometimes they have to say that a person was born approximately on this day or whatever, but a lot of people's births were not recorded, and when they became older, when they needed some information, they required a birth certificate. They didn't even have a birth certificate because their birth wasn't recorded, and they had to go and say, well, I was told that I was born around such and such a day, and their names are put in the delayed birth records book. You can also access many Camp County and Upshur County records online by going to the courthouse websites. Upshur has a lot of good information online that goes way back. Camps, like if you're looking for land records and things, it starts around the 1970s, and you'd have to go into the courthouse to get like earlier land record information. Family search centers are research centers that are located worldwide. They are staffed by volunteers who help you. They will help you build your family tree and find information about your ancestors for free. There are hundreds of family search centers in Texas, I think 600 in Texas alone, and some are located in public libraries. You can find your local family search center by going to familysearch.org, and that's on your handout. The closest family search centers to where we are now are the Gilmer, Texas Family Search Center and the Tyler, Texas Family Search Center. It's important to call ahead of time because they're staffed by volunteers and the hours vary. So you want to make sure they know you're coming and that they're going to be open. Mount Pleasant Public Library Genealogy Room, that was on my list yesterday as a place to visit, and I did not make it there before the library closed. But you can use, I called the librarian and talked to her before I left California. You can use the books and computers in the genealogy room to find family history information, and you can schedule an appointment with the volunteer. The librarian was saying, you can schedule an appointment right now, and I'm like, I won't be in Texas long enough to do that, but when I come during the summer, I definitely plan to hang out there. This is a place I have been to several times, and it's wonderful. That is the Faye McMinn Genealogical Research Center in the Pittsburgh Public Library, Pittsburgh, Camp County. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I've been there numerous times and still have not been able to go through all the information I want to go through. This center has an extensive collection of books and articles that can help you get answers about your family history, not only pertaining to Camp and Upshur counties, but there are books there about from all of the states where people who ended up coming to Upshur. Remember, Camp wasn't formed until 1874, so it was a part of Upshur prior to 1874. But there are books pertaining to the people who came from Georgia, Virginia, Mississippi. I had a big stack of books that I was trying to go through and didn't even, get through more than one or two. So much rich information. Also, a lot of ordinary people have written their family histories and donated it to that. For example, Perry's mother wrote the Bolton family history, and the Bolton family history booklet is in there. I found the family histories that were written by some of my people's enslavers, the Isbels. I kept saying, now why are all these DNA matches with the name I-S-B-E-L coming up? I said they must be related to Peter Sutherland's mother, Lulabelle. They're not. It's a totally different line, and I've narrowed it down to the enslaver right here in Upshur, who enslaved some of my people and brought them from the East. So those family history booklets that are in that research center have lots and lots of information that can save you time. And so that center is open Monday through Wednesday from 9 to 12, and there's a wonderful volunteer there, that Miss Betty, that is willing to help you get answers. Last September, our research team went. Cousin Linnell and Cousin Bobby Ray came to visit our research team at that genealogy center. And then a few days later, when I went back, Cousin Brenda, Cousin Dora Lee, Cousin Tommy Hill, and my cousin Verdell all came, and it was just wonderful. Cousin Rex uses that research center also. Ancestry.com supposedly has the largest collection of genealogy records in the world. They have billions of historical records, including census records such as the 1850 and 1860 slave schedules. Why is that important? Because unless your ancestors were never enslaved in this country, you're not going to find them before 1870 in any census record, except for in the 1850 and 1860 slave schedule. And it will only have the name of their enslaver, the enslaved person's age, gender. Once in a while, there will be a first name for the enslaved person. But most of the information is about the enslaver. How many slaves that person had, what's the nearest post office, and that kind of information. Then you can click on the enslaver's name and go all the way back to see where that enslaver was born, which will give you an idea if that was the person who brought your ancestor to Upshur camp or whatever county you're researching. So you can get a lot of information about the enslavers going back to way back before they ever got to the U.S. But our people were not listed as property, not listed as human beings prior to 1870 in the U.S. Census, unless they were not enslaved. If they were freedmen, then it will be, a black person who was free. But most of the people who are going to come up will be in the 1850 and 1860 censuses. And the problem with that is, like my ancestor, Dandy Bear, his slave name was Daniel. There are going to be 1 million Daniels in the 1850 and 1860 slave records. So then I have to look at the age. This could have been him. If he was in Mississippi, in Georgia, in Texas, and born around 1832, this could be my Daniel, but it might not be. I need more info. And that makes me really upset when I find out how hard it is for us to go beyond 1870 to get answers about our people. But I manage my anger in healthy ways. You can also get birth, marriage, and death records, the Texas death certificates that Ancestry.com and Family Search own. And I'm going to say more about Family Search in a minute. That's where I got the death certificates of many of Dandy Bear's children who were born in Texas. Ancestry.com has 13,600 death certificates that you can access online, but they're not recent death certificates, but of ancestors. People, I can't remember what the cutoff year is. You can also download a lot of wonderful guides from Ancestry.com. This research guide, African American Family Research on Ancestry, a step-by-step guide that will help you get answers about your family history. You can view some of the Ancestry.com records and build your family tree on Ancestry.com for free, but a lot of the records require you to have a paid membership. The Ancestry.com app can also be downloaded on your cell phone, tablet, or of course, computer. So FamilySearch.org has, I'm doing this because I'm afraid this is going to slip off my head. I lost my hair many years ago. This is my real hair, shows you how God works miracles. But when I lost my hair and first wore a wig, I was up doing a big presentation, and the wig was slipping off because I didn't know you needed to put hairpins in there. I kept turning around, pulling it down. So I'm self-conscious about my little rant because it reminds me of when my wig was slipping off my head during the presentation. So please ignore me with that. But this is one of the best ways to get free information. In addition to genealogy records and being able to build your family tree for free on this website, you can look at the catalog of articles and books that they have that you can download for free, such as Family History for Beginners, which is a detailed guide, a book called A Brief History of Upshur County. Now look at the last name of this man. How would you pronounce that? What is it? I'm wondering. See, Dandy Bear, was it B-E-A-R? Was it B-A-I-R? The pronunciation? And a lot of people with that last name come up as my DNA matches. But anyway, I can't say he brought him, his ancestors brought Dandy from Mississippi. But anyway, I keep, every time I look at that and I see my DNA matches with that name, I wonder. But anyway, this man, G.H. Bear, whatever, he wrote A Brief History of Upshur County, which is a book that you can download for free from the Family Search website. A team of interviewers to go out and try to interview all the slaves that were still alive in 1936. Between 1936 and 1938, most slaves had died. So they tried to interview them. And so these books that they went all over the country are the slave stories there. The Texas one is volume 16. There's a part 1 and 2. If you don't want to do it online or you don't like working on computers or whatever, you can actually purchase or get from the library the Slave Narratives of Texas part 1 and part 2. The Oklahoma Historical Society has a lot of great information. How many of you have been told you have Indian blood in you? Right? Don't be ashamed, raise your hand, because I am too. Okay, you can get everything that you need to know in order to find out if your ancestors were put on the official rolls of the 5 so-called civilized tribes: the Choctaw, the Creek, the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, and the Seminole. Those were the ones, and all their stuff is in the book. But let me tell you this, well, there's a book I'll show you in a minute, but you can get it all for free by going to the Oklahoma Historical Society. The Dawes Final Rolls have the list of who was accepted. Freedmen, newborn babies who were enslaved at the time when, all of this, who got land, who didn't. Please just do this, read 1 or 2 applications for enrollment in the 5 civilized tribes. Read Thad Rogers, I'll just throw that one, because that's the first one I read. Cousin Malika Thomas Crawford said, read this. Here's Thad Rogers, one of Perry's relative ancestors and one of Malika's ancestors and one of mine. Read it, you will cry. Because let me tell you this, before you go around bragging that I got a lot of Indian meat, just know the Indians were just as racist as the white folk toward our enslaved ancestors. And if you read an application for enrollment, you will see what they did to cheat our ancestors who were enslaved. If you got a lot of Indian blood in you, it's very likely that your ancestor's enslaver was an Indian. A lot of Indians had slaves, okay? And if you read these applications, they will say, enrollment denied. We will not accept that person. He says he's part of it. Thad Rogers knew his grandmother, who was half Indian, knew her name, knew where she came from. Mary Wassel. All of this is in here. He knew his history. He doesn't speak the Choctaw language. He has bushy hair. He has thick lip. All the little racist terms they could use to deny him from getting the land that his ancestors deserved. Read some of the applications as you're looking for yours, and you will see, before you go, it's all right to brag about your Indian blood, but just know, okay, they didn't like your ancestors any more than a whole bunch of other people didn't either, okay? Now, I may never get invited back here, but this is the grandmother put coming out in me today in the next body. All I can be is who I am. All right, but anyway, you can get a lot of information pertaining to your Indian ancestors through this. And let me say this too, because I'm going to talk about DNA test. If you take a DNA test, or if you've taken one and you say, "Where's my Indian blood?" If it was your 3rd great grandparent or further down the line, it's not going to show up in your bloodline. It has to be much closer than your 3rd grand. So it doesn't mean there's not Indian blood in you, but it doesn't show up in your DNA after the 2nd great grandparent. Keep that in mind. So there are research guides that will help you. It says finding your American Indian ancestors. You can get all of that from the Oklahoma Historical Society website. The National Archives has a lot of wonderful information that will help you. There are a lot of great YouTube videos that you can sit there and become an expert on how to get answers about your family history, how to trace your ancestors as slaves. There are a lot of guides for African Americans who are searching for their history. Back to the DNA test. Another way to get answers is to consider taking one. Has anybody taken one here besides Perry and me and my husband? Let me say, Cousin Phyllis, how could I forget? Taking a DNA test can provide you with a lot of good information about your ancestry and enable you to connect with relatives that you might not know. These relatives may be willing to share information with you that can help you expand your tree. You're going to find a lot of the relatives are in Virginia. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you. A lot of your relatives are going to come from Virginia. They were taken from Africa or from the West Indies to tobacco plantations in Virginia, or sold from the Chesapeake Bay area to Maryland, all the way down to Georgia and inward. That's what was shocking to me. Deep roots in Virginia, North Carolina. But you got deep roots in the Caribbean, in South America, because most slaves who were 95% of the slaves who were taken from Africa were taken to South America and to the Caribbean. Less than 4% were brought to the U.S. We have ancestors all over the world. So when people take DNA tests, and more people who were born and raised in Africa are taking them now. My husband's 100% Ashanti relative, her DNA test results just came back. She lives in Ghana, was born in Ghana. Her parents were born in Ghana. One of my Igbo relatives, 100% Igbo, her DNA test results came back. So you can get a lot of fascinating information through this. I have learned that I'm 90 to 92% African. I look it, that's no surprise, right? The Indian blood don't show up in me. So I wasn't surprised about well, never mind, I won't say that. Anyway, I have learned the names of some of the tribes that my people came from. I've learned a lot of wonderful things, but there are pros and cons to taking DNA tests, okay? Do your research. If you are taking a DNA test or not, whatever you're doing, whatever methods you're using to find out about your family history, be prepared for secrets to surface. Adoptees, a lot of people who were adopted have taken DNA tests. So far, we have connected, my husband and me, with at least 5 who are looking for answers. We found a brother that my husband didn't know he had, and the brother didn't know my husband existed, and they were raised as children. They grew up or were born six blocks apart from each other. And the brother was 70 years old, I think, when we connected with him. So secrets will surface like that. Something else that surfaces, my husband and I have 65 cousins in common. Some from camp in Upshur. So you all who know that you're my cousin, a lot of you may be my husband's cousin too. We're legal though, 5 to 8 cousins. Resistance. You may reach out to people who have answers and they don't want to give you answers for whatever reason. Brick walls. Remember that prior to 1870, most of our ancestors were enslaved, so it's hard to find them prior to 1870. Shocking information, prison records. A lot of prison records you can access through this work, and you'll be shocked at what some of our ancestors were incarcerated. I checked the Camp County jail. Everybody in the jail was black. Not necessarily because they committed crimes. I won't say more, but I said every single person in the Camp County jail in 1909 is a black. Come on now. You know there's something shady about that. Anyway, brick walls, shocking information, prison records, lies about paternity. You may think somebody who you were told was your daddy or so-and-so may not have been. I found that out about one of my close relatives. Information that may make you very angry, and then other surprises. I could look in the mirror, as I said, and see that I got a lot of African in me. I don't see any Indian, but I've been told we got Indian blood in there. Nobody told me about the Caucasian cousins who have taken DNA tests, thousands of them. And I'm just showing you some pictures of some of them. 4th through 8th cousins on my mother and father's side. Which keep standing up because there's more. These are just a few, okay? This one reminded me of the queen that died a few years ago.
That's right.
Queen Elizabeth. This one, all you Sublet, Bells, and Faulkners, there's one of your Bell cousins from Virginia, okay? That's right. This guy, now see, if I would have saw him on the street, there's no way I would have thought that's my cousin. But he's my cousin, okay? And I'm gonna come back to this in a minute. So be prepared for surprising information. This is on your, a lot of this is on your thing. I'm not gonna go through this. There are additional ways to get answers. Please check out if you can handle it, the Slave Voyages website. You can find out a lot of stuff about the enslaved before they were brought here, when they were brought here, where they ended up, but it'll make you cry. So let me wrap this up. I'm gonna shorten the last story. You can preserve your family history by oral storytelling, building your family tree, interviewing family members, writing it down, sharing it with others, keeping important family documents in a chest, like my cousin Bernice Faye Jordan's grandmother kept everything in a chest, making an audio recording. Our ancestor Harrison Sublet, the brother of my great-grandfather Peter Sublet, made a recording that I can listen to because cousin Charles Hill shared it with me of one of my ancestors telling the Sublet and Gail and Faulkner family history. You can think about writing a book. I'm writing 2 books for my grandsons. The first one is Rufus Thompson, my husband's family history. I'm on chapter 3, still doing a lot of research. We have been to Mississippi. We're going back to Mississippi and May, God willing, and connected with a lot of his people. But I'm writing his family history book for my grandsons and writing mine eventually. So remember, every single person is important. Each family is important. Every child needs to know his or her family history. It's important for us to preserve our family histories and share them with future generations. Let me just share this last story and then I'm really done. And you can ask questions, and those who can't stay for the question and comment section, I will understand that you have to leave. Although I did want to take a group picture. But anyway, here's a quick story. I was on a plane several years ago, going on a work-related trip, and I don't even know where I was going. Had a lot of work on my lap, wanting to work throughout the whole flight, and the man next to me struck up a conversation, asked me what I did for a living, blah, blah, blah. And he told me a story that everybody needs to know. He said, well, I'm gonna tell you this story about a case that occurred in Los Angeles. I live in San Diego County. This happened in Los Angeles. And this is a white guy telling me the story. He said there was an African-American man who was incarcerated in Los Angeles. And right before he was about to be released from prison, they routinely ran his DNA. So keep this in mind, a side note about DNA. They routinely ran his DNA through the system, and they got a hit on an unsolved crime. We don't have any minors in here, so I can tell you. It was a rape kit, an unsolved rape. His DNA matched some of the DNA in the rape kit. And so he was told, you're not getting out of here. This is going to be your 3rd strike. You're getting 25 years to life. And he was saying, I don't know anything about this. And they thought he was lying. Thank God he went before an African-American female judge who said, I listened to what the prosecution said, but something is not adding up here. Some of his DNA markers do match that kit, but a lot of it doesn't. Something doesn't add up. So the prosecution hired the man who was sitting next to me, who was a DNA expert, to get answers. You know what he told me? He said, I had to do a lot of research, but I found out that the man who was about to get 25 years to life in prison and the lady who had been raped were distant cousins. They had never ever met, but they had a common ancestor on a plantation in Louisiana during slavery. I said, you need to write about this. You need to publicize this, because there are a lot of black men who are in jail right now, probably for the same reason. All of a sudden, he wanted to end the conversation. But here's the moral of that story. Remember the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, because you don't know who may be your relative.
That's right.
You may be looking at somebody every single day from a different race. Your same race, somebody you can't stand, may be a relative. Treat everybody kindly, humanely, respectfully, because you never ever know who's a relative because of what was done to split up our families. Now, Gwen's over here, so I'm feeling real nervous. My husband held up a thing. Thank you for your time, your attention. Those who want to stay for questions and answers, I'm here for as long as you are. And did you want to say something?
I just want to thank everybody and thank you, Dr. Gail, for coming. Some water and a little pizza for those that want to hang around and ask questions and whatnot. And feel free to tour the museum. I just appreciate you guys coming, and especially Doctor. I want to ask that everybody leave something for a donation so that I can bring more programs like this to the museum. Okay, whatever you feel, it'll be fine. All right?
Thank you so
Okay?
much.
You're welcome.
So, do you want to get a snack and bring it back, or what do you want to do? Because you've been sitting for a long time. Do you want to grab some pizza and a water
We
for
do have
those
two
who want to stay?
bathrooms, so there's a bathroom back there. This way.
Yes, I do want a group picture for those who can't stay especially. So, where is it? Yeah. Hey, can everybody quickly stand in here, step in here for a group picture?